You're listening to episode number 77 of the Transform Your Life from the Inside Out podcast. In this episode, I go into the concept of control and why control is an illusion. If you're a control freak or you tend to get into control, you're going to love this episode. Hi, I'm Jim Fortin, and you're about to start transforming your life from the inside out with this podcast. I'm widely considered the leader in subconscious transformation, and I've coached super achievers all around the world for over 25 years. Here, you're going to find no rah-rah motivation and no hype, because this podcast is a combination of brain science, transformational psychology, and ancient wisdom all rolled into one to take your life to levels you've never thought possible. If you're wanting a lot more in life, to feel better, to heal, to have peace of mind, to feel powerful and alive, and to bring more abundance and prosperity into your life, then this podcast is for you, because you're going to start learning how to master your mind and evolve your consciousness. And when you do that, anything you want then becomes possible for you. I'm glad you're here. Okay, so a little earlier, I don't know, a month ago or whatever, I did do an episode on control. And candidly, I know I've mentioned here that I have a video marketing company, and we've already shot our videos, content calendar for 6 months. And this was a video they shot. And when they shoot videos, I've got to create corresponding podcasts. And I'm like, okay, what I do not like to do is people that just repeat their content or it's the same thing over and over. And I always want to, even if I talk about the same topic, I definitely want to put a different spin and a twist on it. So I'm going to I'm going to give you a little bit different perspective on this episode in the event you've already listened to the other on control. So when we talk about control, and you're listening for a reason. So my question is, are you a control freak? Are you married to a control freak? Do you get into control? And then to what degree do you get into control? Now, obviously, I think everyone gets into some degree. Well, almost everyone gets into some degree of control. And it's just a matter of how they get into it or the context for getting into it. So what is control? That's a really big question, and I'm gonna, in this episode talk about literally that we either get into control of ourselves or we get into control of other people. Personally, I'm not so concerned about controlling other people because I know that I can't. So any control issues that I would have would be control of self. So also people get into varying degrees of control, whether it be themselves or of other people. And you've got people that really, you know, like me, I mean, I have no desire to control other people, and I mean none. And basically, I know it's a waste of energy and it's just draining to try to do that. And like I said, I can't do it anyway. And even when it comes to controlling myself, I mean, over the years as I've matured and stuff like that, I definitely know even when it comes to myself, which I'll demonstrate in just a bit or I'll share with you, there's nothing that I can, I'm going to use the word here and I'm going to air quote, control. I can choose things and I can precipitate things and I can actually be engaged in things emotionally or mentally or physically. But sometimes when it comes to control, really there's nothing that any of us can control. And like I said, I'll talk about that in just a little bit. But when we talk about self-control, people will say, well, you can control what you put in your body. Well, has anybody told somebody that's bulimic or anorexic that? Now, I've read some research on this, and as I understand, that bulimia is a control issue because the premise is, at least unconsciously, is that the person can control what they put into their body. And then when I talk about control of self, I've got an episode coming up in a couple of weeks, and the title of the episode is You're Not in Control. Your brain is. And I'll talk about that. I think maybe it's even a week from now, but it's all about how your brain controls you, and you're not even aware that your brain's controlling you. So even though you think you might have control of your life, generally it's an illusion. Also, I have found controlling of others is that, number one, it's near impossible to control other people, and especially people who get into control don't like to be controlled, will rebel, being controlled. So it's near impossible to control other people unless you've got a gun to their head or, they're in prison or whatever, extenuating circumstances. But control of others, let me share with you, and I want you to look at, let me give you an example here. And like I said, I don't have any notes here, so I kind of hop around. But I remember somebody in one of my programs, and she's actually, many people go through my programs many times, and she's currently in a program, and her name is Sandy. And I think she's in her 50s, and she has, I believe it's two boys, if I remember correctly, two boys, but they're older. One's 24 and one's 27. Now, being a mother, I think every mother for the most part wants the best for their kids. So because she wants the best for her kids, what she was trying to do until she started working with me is she's trying to control her kids. Now, you can try to do that when your kids are young because many people command their kids. And it doesn't work when you have teenagers, which many of you do, or you have older kids. And actually, the more you try to control them, the more they rebel. And the challenge that she was getting into is that her relationship with her boys, the last thing she wanted was a relationship that was deteriorating. Why? Because moms love their kids. Parents love their kids. But the relationship was deteriorating because her sons actually resented the mom who tried to control them, and she was trying to control them because she wanted them to be safe or in their best interest or whatever. So look at yourself as a parent. Are you trying to control your kids? And that's what I hear people say a lot of is I'm trying to control my kids. I'm not going to talk about it a lot in this episode, but food for thought is that parents, when they have kids, small kids, they generally control their kids and they command their kids. And many people, their thought process is that they're being great parents and they're being stewards of their children and they're looking out for what's in the best interest of their kids. However, here's where things start breaking down. When kids become, as you've heard me mention before, that the unconscious mind literally is just wide open until about the age of 8. The analytical mind is, and that part of the brain's not fully developed yet. But what happens is parents learn to command and control their small kids, 7, 8, 9 years old and under. And then what happens is when the kids get older, 10, 11, and 12 and older, parents haven't shifted and recognized that, hey, I've got a kid here that's got an analytical mind and I can't control anymore. I have to start talking to my kid like a young adult. I have to start bargaining. I have to start negotiating. I have to start communicating with my kid instead of trying to control my kid. So hopefully that's food for thought for a lot of yous, a lot of you, when you're wondering why I can't control my 10-year-old, 11, 12, and 13-year-old. Why? Because they have changed neurologically and psychologically. Now, the thing about control also is, I don't know whether or not, and I use the word colloquially, that you're a control freak, but I've read some research that control freaks have significantly, which makes sense to me, significantly increased anxiety. And the irony here is the anxiety is inner turmoil and stress for people, and they have the inner turmoil and stress because they're trying to control the external turmoil. Look at that for a second. Think about that. When you're trying to you've got all this internal stress and strife on the inside, look at how much you're trying to control on the outside instead of choosing and managing yourself on the inside. Also, controlling of others is I read this research one time at Harvard University, and they said the number one cause of job-related stress is bad management. And I have not worked for anybody in decades, but I remember when I did that what I resented most back then, and I use that word, it just, I don't know, flows off the tongue, but what I rebelled against or resented most is micromanagers. And I used to have a manager one time. This guy would manage, everything. Even after I was fully trained and very, very good, as a matter of fact, I was a leader in my job back then, he would pick up a phone line and listen in to control the conversation. He would see what I was saying, so later he could chime in, oh, you did this, you did that, you missed this, you missed that. And I remember how frustrating it was for me to have a manager that was a complete, and I do mean complete, control freak. So if you are a highly controlling person, that can contribute to serious consequences in your relationship. When I look at control also, I see it to varying degrees in relationships. I'm in a personal relationship I've been in for 18 years, and neither of us really, at all, get into control issues of the other person for the most part. And I know that really I'm just, it's not important for me to control people or my partner. I'm thinking of this young couple that they're an extended family. They're part of my extended family, and I don't know. He's probably 22. She's probably 21, And at the opposite extreme of my relationship, I mean, she has massive, massive, massive control issues. And I'm going to talk about this a little further in a moment. But her control issue is that she wants to know where he is at all times. She can, I guess they have apps now. You can track where your kids' phones are and stuff like that. And she has that software on his phone so she can track him. Now, what I'm going to share with you is even though this is a massive control issue, it's also not a control issue, which I'll get to in just a minute, and several of you might be able to see yourself. Not that you're controlling like she is, but you might see yourself in just a moment when I say control is not a control issue. It's another issue, which we'll get to. Control also leads to a lot of self-criticism, and that is people generally personalize when they can't control things and they make it about themselves. So if I can't control everything around me, that must mean self-criticism that I'm weak or I'm not aware enough or I don't pay attention enough or I need to work harder or something. But I do notice that when people get into extreme amounts of control, many times the reverse boomerang effect of that is self-criticism. Okay, so just a couple of minutes ago, I said that control many times, not always, control is not about control. But here's a twist for you because, again, I want to make every episode, I want a nugget. And I've already done an episode on control, and I want a nugget in here. But what I've noticed many years ago, and it applies to the young kids that I'm talking about as well, I just mentioned. Number one is she is so insecure that she doesn't want him talking to any other girls. I mean, if he literally passed a girl in the mall, he's not even allowed to say hi. I mean, it's pretty immature and pretty ridiculous. And you know what? Adults do the same stuff as well. But you know what? We can look at her and say she's in a control issue, and she is in a control issue, or having a control issue, or engaged in a control issue. But even further than that, are you ready? It's a trust issue. And many times when we're trying to control other people, it might not be control per se, even though it looks like control. The root of it is trust. Can I trust other people? And even the example I gave you about, the my boss, it was a trust issue. And by the way, I was like the number one person at our company who did what I did. But I mean, this guy for the 18 months that I was there, and I couldn't stand it anymore. I had to go because we were micromanaged. Like, it was crazy. But it was a trust issue because he was always correcting me when I was the highest producer at this place, and he always found, room to correct something. And that's a trust issue because I wasn't doing it in the way that he wanted me to do it. I want to segue here for a second. Also, I wanted to say that all the entrepreneurs that I've coached, there's one entrepreneur that I coached. Well, there's several, but I don't coach anyone one-to-one unless they make over $1 million a year. And there's someone that I coached one-to-one 2 years ago, and his business was at $2 million per year when he started with me. 2 years later, his business is at $10 million per year. And if you were to ask him, he would tell you that's directly related to me. Now, the biggest challenge that I saw in his business is that he had his hands on the wheel, meaning, and he wasn't a micromanager, but he had to control many aspects of his business. And he always had his fingers in a lot of things. And as a result of that, he was literally not letting his employees develop themselves, but he was also actually, because he had to not micromanage, but manage everything and have his fingers in everything, literally, he was exhausted. Okay, and I'm using off topic. I'm using a Sennheiser microphone. It's very expensive and very high quality, and I'm hearing a little popping. So hopefully you guys are not getting that same popping. Actually, I think it just might be in the situation of the microphone. So hopefully that's not coming through. So let me share a place that I work from, and this is something that I've learned with obviously my mentor. Well, not obviously, but one of my mentors that I mention often in these episodes is, and my sister and I were laughing about this because it's her husband, and we were talking about, air quote, getting or having an STD. Now, most people think, obviously STD is a sexually transmitted disease. And when we talk about STD, because I'd love to give every one of you listening an STD, and again, stay with me. STD is this, is surrender, trust, and no doubt. So that's where I work from in life is I surrender. I can't control anything. And so many people try to control outcomes, which I've also done an episode on attachment. When I do things like, a launch and I'll launch my transformational program, I can't control what's going to happen. I can't control, and this has happened before. I can't control if the electricity is going to go out when I'm doing a webinar. I can't control who's going to, want to transform their life or not. I can't control, like our last launch, our email service went down. Thankfully, it's only, like an hour before the cart closed, and pretty much everyone was in by that time. But our final email, the email company went down. I don't know, what do you call them, servers or whatever. Anyway, my team handles all that. But our email delivery service went down an hour before the cart closed. And my project manager called me, and I just laughed it off. I mean, what am I going to do? I can't control anything. And then, no doubt. Doubt comes, as you've heard me say before, from right or wrong thinking. If you get into, am I doing it right or doing it wrong, then you get into doubt. So control issues, in my observation, are the reverse of STD, is that you're not surrendering, you're not trusting, and you're doubting. And oh my gosh, you guys know this, that those of you that try to control things, oh my gosh, how exhausting that can be. Just let go and love or enjoy your STD. So I want to share something else with you here is, and you've heard me say it before, I think on the other episode, is that control is an illusion. There's nothing, literally, and if you think you can, really, I really want you to look at this. There's nothing that you can control, nothing in your life. And you could say, well, Jim, I can control my thinking. No, you can't. And again, I have an episode coming up on that. So if you're such a master at controlling your thinking, how come you have pesky thoughts that come back of self-doubt or lack of confidence or fear or whatever? Now, fear is brain-based and reptilian brain as well. But notice that. If you could control all of your brain, then guess what? Fear would not hop into your life. I mean, this is brain-based. So control is an illusion. Consider that. Control is an illusion. You cannot control anything. You can, however, choose. Now, there's the subtle distinction, is that people think, oh, I can control my thinking. No, you can't. Why does that thinking, which I just alluded to, why does that thinking pop up? Like, you suck, or you're horrible at this, or you're bad at that. What we can do in that moment is we can consciously choose to move our attention. But notice, you didn't control whether or not that thought popped into your mind. What's interesting also is when I say we can't control anything, look at your life. I find it almost, it's humorous to me to watch, and the ways that people get into control. What I mean by that is you look at somebody that's really into control, and they're trying to control people. But you know what? They'll have no problem. I'll say things like, do you like flying? Oh, sure, I like flying. Well, consider that when you hop on an airplane, I mean, you're in this aluminum tube in the sky. You have zero, and I do mean zero control. That's why when people say things, and I think it's more just colloquial and wishing well, but people will say, well, have a safe flight. I have no control. If I'm on a jetliner with 300 other people, I have no control, and I mean zero control of what's going to happen. Same thing. You hop in a car. You have no control over all the drivers around you. And I live in DFW part of the year, and we've got 6 million people here in DFW. I mean, the tollways move at 80 miles an hour, which I drive a Porsche, so I like that. But I can't control what people do around me. I can't control when people flick cigarettes out the window or throw trash out or weave into my lane or drive too slow or whatever. When I say too slow, meaning they're not merging with traffic or whatever, I can't control that. Something as simple as eating in a new restaurant. I mean, guys, you've heard me mention before, I used to work in really nice restaurants many, many years ago. And one place I worked, I mean, it was spotless. You could eat on the floor, literally. I mean, literally, it was spotless. Another place, not so much. So when you go to a restaurant, you can't control what they do back in the kitchen. And that's why I'm going to share with you is be nice to your server. I was never one of those people that did anything to people's food if I'd boxed it up or any of that. But I'm going to tell you, there are servers that are not as kind as I am. I have seen, oh gosh, the memories. I'm going to go way off topic here. I used to work out at a very expensive steakhouse, and I don't want to mention a name because they're still very well known, and I don't know, I could get sued or something. But I saw this waiter literally, if you've ever waited tables, you know that when you take your dishes to the dish rack, you literally dump all the food in the trash and you put the dishes in the dish rack. And like 90% of restaurants. I saw this waiter one time with rubber gloves on, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "That a-hole at table number 42. He wants to take his steak home with him. I've already thrown it away." And he's digging through the trash looking for this man's steak, and he squirts. I'm sorry. He squirts it off with the water, the dishwashing hose, and boxes it up and sends it home with the guy. Completely off top. Completely off topic. All I'm telling you, be nice to your server because you can't control what happens back in the kitchen. So, I'm still laughing here. Oh my gosh. What I want to share with you is this is have you noticed that when you trust, like when you hop on the flight or hop in the car or eat somewhere, is that when you trust what you're doing or the people you're with, not always, but you generally do not get into control. That's why for many of us an STD can be so valuable. So, surrender, trust, and no doubt. Now, the irony here also is, when we talk about releasing control, the irony is that if a person's high value or way of being in the world is control, the irony is that the challenge is they don't want to release control because then they will have no control. Therefore, they want to control having control. So therefore, they do not want to release control. And that's the double-edged sword of releasing control. But I'll tell you this. I'm sure you probably heard me say many times before, and I want to point out is if you're new to the podcast, you hear me say quite often, go back to the very first episode and start there. Everything, it doesn't build on itself, but everything is like a piece of a jigsaw puzzle. So if you're brand new, I appreciate it, but go back to episode number 1. What I'm going to share with you is, I promise, when you stop trying to control things and you find peace, life becomes so much easier. And you might have heard me say that, and I tell all of my coaching programs this, the focus for me in 2017 and 2018 was not being affected by my external world. You've heard me mention before, probably heard me mention, the Dalai Lama says, give your internal peace to no one's behavior, or something along those lines. Maybe it's even, don't let what people do, steal your internal peace. But that's also, I recognized, a few years back, that's also a control issue. So when you stay in peace and you observe, life becomes so much easier. Okay, so the transformational takeaway this week is that control is an illusion. And when you try to control things, you are controlled by the illusion of control. And I've also shared with you in this episode is that you can't even control, air quote, around the word control, you can't even control your thinking. You can choose your thinking, but you cannot control your thinking. Okay, so hopefully you enjoyed this episode. And the next episode, Q&A for Monday is from Darla. And I see this with a lot of people. As I said, every episode that I pick it because I think it's going to resonate with the most amount of people. But Darla's question is, how do I release and forgive my past? So if you're holding on to guilt and shame or any of this nonsense, it's head garbage, but I understand it, any of this from your past, then make sure that you tune in and you listen to the Monday episode. Okay, stay well, make it an awesome, awesome day today, and I'll catch you on another episode. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to this entire podcast. If you're the kind of person who likes to help others, then share this with your friends and family. If you found value, they will too. So please share via your social media channels. Also, if you have questions, I'm here to assist. You can email me questions to support@jimfortin.com, and I may even use your question for a future podcast episode. Also, if you want transformational content like this daily, connect with me on Instagram. My Instagram name is I am Jim Fortin. Finally, I do have a personal request. I believe that we're all here to help others and to grow and evolve ourselves. Together, you and I, let's help more people. If you would please leave a review on iTunes, and a good one by the way. I'd be grateful, and through your assistance together, we can transform more lives. Thanks for listening.